Hi. We continue today with our conversation about God words, defining theological terms that we find for now in the letter to the Romans, terms that help us understand the fellowship into which God invites us. The term that we're finding today is in Romans chapter 8, verses 15 and 16. For you have not received a spirit of slavery leading to fear again, but you have received a spirit of adoption as sons, by which we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. The word that we're going to be considering today is the word adoption. It's one of many terms that God inspired the authors of His Word, as they recorded His Word for us, to use to help us get a better understanding of what our fellowship with God is all about. We've looked at a number of these words already. We've looked at the word righteousness, or being declared righteous, being justified, both of those synonyms for being declared not guilty of our sin, not because we're not guilty, but because Jesus suffered the penalty for our sin. We've seen the word redemption, which is about being set free from slavery, and in a spiritual sense, from our slavery to sin and death. We have the word salvation, which means that we are rescued from a dire situation. This word, adoption, is another one of those words that fit into this group of words that describe what it is that God has done for us. And I think that we have so many different terms because each of us has a different way of thinking, a different way of learning. Back when I was in the classroom, we talked about ways that we learn, that different ones of us learn in different ways. And so as teachers, we want to adapt our lessons for those who learn better by seeing, or those who learn better by hearing, or those who learn better by being in close proximity, tactile learners, a variety of different ways to learn. Also different mind processes. For example, I think that I'm fairly good at discerning literature and literary themes, whereas I'm really bad with math. You can show me how to solve an algebraic equation, and maybe for the next half an hour or so, I may remember how to do it and even, have some small sense of the process. But long term, math is hard for me. The same is true, I think, for people who tend to have math minds. That the application of language, although language is very important in all of our studies and whatever discipline we're thinking about, we need language because we need to be able to communicate. But to be able to pick apart the pieces of a sentence and to label the subject, to label the verb, to label the, even to know the labels, the predicate, nominative, or the direct object, or the indirect object, or the object of a preposition, or the appositive, or all these different terms that we have. To me, those come easy, whereas the finding X, Y, and Z don't. So we have different ways of learning. And so I think that one of the reasons that God has given us so many different words to help us understand the fellowship He has with us is so that we can find the one that perhaps fits our method of learning best. So for some, maybe those who have a stronger legal mind, being declared righteous or being justified makes more sense. Maybe the more tactile person, redemption makes more sense. Or here, adoption. Adoption is very much a very relationship-oriented word. And so what this looks like then, as we apply this term to our fellowship with God, the clear implications are that we are born outside of fellowship with God. We are not in God's family. And, I suppose there are those who don't want to be in God's family. Unfortunately, I think that's the case. For whatever reason, I would hope that being in God's family is something good and something that we want. But we have to come to the recognition that we are born, that we are conceived and born outside of God's family. And that in order for us to be in God's family, God must come to us and act on our behalf. And so we can use this concept of adoption. We recognize, and this is particularly true in infant adoption. And I suppose that as a child grows older and older, then they have maybe some sense that they want to or don't want to be in a particular family. And that is the same with us, with God. Not that we can choose to be in his family, but we can certainly choose not to be in his family. But if we apply the concept as infants, and this ties in very beautifully to our whole understanding of baptism and why we baptize our infants, because they're born outside of God's family. And what God does, and we understand that baptism is something that God does to us and for us, not something that we do for him, and that he can do it for us no matter what our age is. And so this picture of adoption fits beautifully, because God chooses and does everything necessary, goes through all the legal steps, and even pays the fees. In that sense, we talk about the payment that Christ makes on the cross for us, so that he can take us out of our situation, which is a broken situation, a broken family situation, where we will not be healthy spiritually, and he adopts us. He claims us and brings us into his family. We see in John's Gospel, in the beginning of John's Gospel, that as the Holy Spirit revealed to John, and he wrote for us, God's words, that whoever receives Jesus and believes in him, to that one and to those, God gives the right to become children of God. And so here in Romans chapter 8, then, we have the word adoption. Another word, another term, another picture to help us understand what it is that God has done for us. That he recognizes that we are conceived and born into a broken family, into a family that will result in our never being in fellowship with him. So he, in his great love and mercy, lavishes the riches of his grace on us and adopts us into his family, so that we have received the spirit of adoption, so that we can be declared the children of God. Thanks for being a part of the conversation with me. I'm interested in your comments. Please leave them in the comments below, and God bless you.